こんにちは。本日は子どもを守る法廷劇福島集団疎開裁判に雨の中おいでくださいましてありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for coming to the World Citizens Tribunal for the Fukushima class action for collective evacuation. My name is Michiko Kamiyama, lawyer. Thank you very much for coming.
駒崎由紀子よりご挨拶申し上げます。
Komazaki Yukiko will first give introductory remarks. Greetings. I'm one of the people in charge of the Fukushima class action for collective evacuation. My name is Shimazaki Yuko. Our lives changed completely from last year, March 11th. The warmth that we feel, it's in this northern country of Fukushima, the first signs of spring are when the children run out into the fields, into nature, and play actively. But from last March, this is not possible anymore. They now have to play indoors. They are limited in their playing outdoors to 1 hour. All sports activities are limited. Last December, in Koriyama, we found that because there is so much problem with children playing outdoors, now there is a internal indoors sports activity center that has been established inside in a building. So now we watch children playing indoors in a building. Even now, 0.62 microsieverts per hour is recorded in our environment around us in Koriyama. Last December, we checked how much cumulative amounts of radiation was received. It was found that children cumulative could have accumulated as much as 8 millisieverts of radiation per year in the year. We now have to deal with evacuation, also change in employment. We are dealing with that, but what Koriyama City is now proposing is only decontamination. They do not activate and try to promote evacuation of the citizens. Koriyama City is stating that it cannot assess how many people have left the city. But when we look at Koriyama, about 15,000 people probably have evacuated out because of the accident. However, there are many people who cannot leave, even though they did want to leave. Last May, an organization began called the Fukushima Network for Saving Children from Radiation. When that organization was established, the issue that was of primary concern was that the standard was changed after the accident from 1 millisieverts to 20 millisieverts per year, and that this was even applied to children, and that this could not be allowed. And that was why this organization was established. And after that, lawyer Yanagihara and others started this effort. In other words, this class action. We will now deal with this. Right now, the trial is at a crossroads. The district court, we lost in the district court. The reason why we lost in district court is unforgivable. Without protecting the children, There is no rehabilitation. There is no resurrection of our society. That's what I believe. This lawsuit, we must win. Please look at this World Citizens Tribunal and please support our efforts. It is your support and your encouragement that will help us. Thank you so much. We will now start a play. This is a court play enacting the actual hearings that were undertaken in Koriyama last year. This is on June 24th last year. 14 elementary and junior high school students sought a temporary injunction as a means of emergency relief at the Koriyama branch of the Fukushima District Court, demanding the municipality authority of Koriyama to give classes in an environment with annual radiation dose of less than 1 millisieverts. The 14 students did this not only for their own evacuation, but also for the evacuation of all the children who were having classes in an environment with a dangerously high level of radiation. However, it was difficult for all the students to participate in the trial in such a short time. Therefore, the 14 decided to lead the way in seeking refuge from radioactivity. In today's World Citizens Tribunal, the judge's seat is, as you see, in this place. We decided to have the seat of the judge be lowered at the same level as all the other individuals. However, this is set up because of the situation here in this room. In today's World Citizens Tribunal, for your better understanding, we applied to this tribunal normal court procedures you're familiar with and introduced a discussion by jury. In our current Japanese civil action, there is no jury. However, we decided to introduce a discussion, a procedure with a jury. First of all, I would like to show you a video of the parents of the 14 students explaining why they filed a trial on behalf of their children. What did you feel when you heard suddenly that the dose of 20 millisieverts was allowed for children? Before filing this lawsuit, we started to demand to lower the 20 millisievert standard, and the government started to mention 1 millisievert as a better effort target. Yes, we never heard about 20 millisieverts before that. We were surprised that the original standard of 1 millisievert was suddenly raised to 20 millisieverts. However, we are not sure if 20 millisieverts is really dangerous or not. Maybe it's okay, maybe it's not. We just don't know. It's really hard for us to judge. So we don't know what to trust. The standard the government mentions went up and down. The only figure we can trust is that 0.07 millisieverts a year, which is the annual dose in Fukushima before the earthquake. We cannot but worry about any figure higher than this because it means there are traces of radioactivity. There is radioactivity released by the accident. Do you think the teachers are making efforts to learn about radioactivity? We feel we have to send our children to school, but the Ministry of Education is not trustworthy and does nothing for our children. The teachers are always trying to calm our concerns down, saying there's no problem, but it's obvious that they are controlled. I don't know what they think personally, but in their job they cannot but repeat, don't worry, everything is okay if you don't stay outside. We're really worried that our children are put in such a situation. And the people who, and then whenever there's seminars being undertaken, it's always people who work on the side of government and industry experts. Then they say everything is fine, 20 millisieverts is fine. But then we learn that that's not the case, and so then we become very worried. But those academics who just work on the side of government and industry always keep repeating that everything is fine, you can just live a normal life. They don't tell us the truth. And they always say that we're working towards 1 millisieverts, everything is not a problem, so you can feel assured, you can bring your children to school and not worry about anything. So the teachers, as long as the top people, the principals, etc., the government say everything is okay, the teachers can't say anything different. And most people get confused and don't know what to think. Most people never thought about political situations, but now I think it's different. On the other hand, I feel relieved with the word collective, of the collective evacuation. I thought it is good, especially for my children, for avoiding a sense of solitude. Not only the children, but also the parents need some support. Alone, it's very hard for individual parents to decide to evacuate, even if he or she is deeply concerned. But collectively, we may be able to move somewhere else, do something about this situation. You see, if there's some way of understanding how we can evacuate, maybe we might be able to do it. We will now start the trial play. One is, there are 3 issues to address. One is internal contamination, then external evacuation, external exposure, and also about evacuation. The discussion we will have now is where the trial was at last December 2011. The court is now sitting. Plaintiffs, please explain what you're seeking for in this tribunal. Yes, Your Honor. We are asking the municipal authority of Koriyama to be evacuated to a safe place where the air dose rate is less than 1 millisieverts per year. Your Honor, I have questions to the plaintiffs. Yes, go ahead, please. Thank you. What the plaintiffs claim is not the evacuation of the 14 students, but of all the primary and junior high school students in Koriyama. We think such a claim is not recognized as a civil trial in Japan. No, it is a misunderstanding of the defendant. We are hoping that this trial will produce the evacuation of all the children receiving education now in this dangerously radioactive environment. However, in this trial, we are seeking the evacuation of only these 14 students. Did you understand? Yes, we did. It's difficult to understand, but okay, we understand, but we leave it up to the court. The plaintiffs, can you explain why you filed this lawsuit? First, I'd like to claim on the external exposure. The total exposure limit for the general public is fixed at 1 millisieverts a year, even by the international. This was always so in domestic law, but also even by the International Commission on the Radiological Protection, which is known as an organization promoting nuclear power plants. It is obvious that this 1 millisieverts a year limit must be strictly applied to younger generations who are more sensitive to radiation. The plaintiffs have already received radiation doses ranging from 7.8 to 17.16 millisieverts since March 12th till the end of August last year. This is cumulative exposure. It is estimated that in a year from March 11th last year to March 10th of this year, they will have received doses of from 12.7 to 24 millisieverts a year. Moreover, at the end of October 2011, when the proceedings of this trial ended, the plaintiffs were still being educated in a hazardous environment with radiation that would exceed 1 millisieverts a year. In addition, at the end of October last year, the whole area surrounding the school that plaintiffs attend, corresponding to regulations, received regional duty evacuation and would have been equivalent to the compulsory evacuation area designated by Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus to cope with the Chernobyl nuclear accident. In other words, all the areas in Koriyama are equivalent to the district where there was compulsory evacuation in the case of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. The red circles on the map on the screen show the area. This is Koriyama. All these areas would be mandatory evacuation areas if it were Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. In conclusion, the air dose rate that plaintiffs will receive while attending school in 1 year after March 11th will be from 12 to 24 times the annual exposure limit of 1 millisieverts a year, which is extremely dangerous when we compare it with the criteria of compulsory evacuation for the Chernobyl accident. The municipality of Koriyama should immediately evacuate the plaintiffs. What is the defendant's plea? We admit that since March 11th, elementary and junior high school students of Fukushima Prefecture are placed at risk of exposure to radiation. For other matters, we plead ignorance. Do you mean you plead ignorance for all the claims by the plaintiffs on the annual cumulative external doses to the 14 students from March 11th to the end of August, as well as a comparison with the Chernobyl evacuation criteria? Yes, Your Honor. Do you have any plea concerning external exposure? Yes, we do. Please explain. First, according to the results of the measuring at plaintiff schools by integrated dosimetry conducted in June and July 2011, the air dose rate was only 0.08 to 0.2 microsieverts per hour. How did the plaintiffs rebut this? It was not the children. Is this really correct? Because it was not the children but the faculty who carried integrating dosimeters. Is it really applicable to children? The faculty spend much time in school, which is made of concrete, in the building, while the children spend their time in the schoolyard. So the measurement result dose does not necessarily represent the children's dose. Secondly, with an assumption that the students are in their school 8 hours a day, and 200 days a year, the estimated annual dose comes to 0.13 to 0.32 millisieverts, which is in any case less than 1 millisieverts. Do the plaintiffs have any remark to make in rebuttal of this point? From the standpoint of protection of the health of children, exposure must be considered on a span of 24 hours if we're to consider the safety of the children. Children receive high dose during their commuting to and coming home from school, as well as in their wooden homes, rather than inside the school building made of concrete. So even if the dose inside the school building is at the level of the defendants argue, the total dose during 24 hours can be far beyond the 1 millisieverts. How do you plead? We plead ignorance. Judge, Your Honor, we don't understand the argument of the defendant. The plaintiffs contend that the maximum dose is estimated at 17.16 millisieverts a year from March 11th to the end of August, which is already very serious. To this, the defendant rebut based on their own figures of cumulative external dose of the plaintiffs estimated from the cumulative air dose rate measured in June and July, but their calculation is done supposing that as if the massive exposure since March 11th had never taken place. Is this enough to rebut the plaintiff's argument? Any counter-argument? Defendant is of the position that it is not necessary to take into account large amounts of doses after March 11th because the exposure in the past cannot be prevented by this trial. Do the plaintiffs have any rebuttal on this point? Of course, the plaintiffs are not asking to prevent the exposure in the past by this trial. We are saying that in order to properly evaluate the current risk of exposure of the plaintiffs, it does not make sense if you don't take into account the exposure in the past since March 11th. Otherwise, the risk would be considered as if there had been no massive exposure since March 11th. At this point, we asked our jury to discuss the risks of external exposure that was a subject of the previous debate. The plaintiffs argue that the maximum annual cumulative dose could have reached 17 millisieverts between March and August. This is a formidable amount of irradiation. Even that is lower than the provisional exposure limit of 20 millisieverts fixed by the Ministry of Education on April 19, 2011. So there's no problem. But before March 11th, the ministry itself had 1 millisieverts as exposure limit. I wonder why that could be raised up to 20 times after a nuclear accident happened. The ministry says the reason is because the ICRP has said on March 21st last year, if it's 20 millisieverts or below, there is no problem. This is what it said when it released its emergency recommendation to the government of Japan. I read that emergency recommendation earnestly over and over, but I couldn't really make out the reason. I couldn't understand it. Is there something wrong with me? You don't have to worry about that. That is what the government decided based on the opinion of the experts. So we have only to follow it. I think everyone in Fukushima thinks so too. I heard a teacher at a local elementary school saying, if you can't believe what the Japanese government says, you should stop being a Japanese citizen, a Japanese national. Am I getting barmy? Where is the sovereignty of the people? Please let me tell you what I thought on my own inquiry. In my opinion, even if children are placed in a hazardous environment with a dose 20 times higher than the normal, it could be allowed if there is something to protect more important than the lives and the health of the children. But in fact, there is no such thing. You're quite cheeky, not going to school and saying that. I don't get it at all. The Supreme Court has also ruled even the life of a human being can be restricted for the sake of the public welfare. But if nothing is done, the maximum cumulative exposure until March 11th this year can reach 24 millisieverts a year. This is more than the Ministry of Education's provisional limit of 20 millisieverts. Isn't this dangerous? But still, it's below 100 millisieverts. So what's the problem? That is also what a professor who came from Nagasaki to Fukushima as an advisor said. What? Am I really getting crazy? That professor he said in another place that there was no data proving the exposure to radiation below 100 millisieverts has effects on the health. It's only a small difference of expression. The contents are almost the same. What? Small difference? I mean, the fact that there is no data to prove the absence of effects, it simply means it's gray. No safety has been proved. But if you heard someone say you have no problem below 100 millisieverts, what would you think? I would think it's safe. I think so. But the reality is that it is gray, which means it may be dangerous. That's completely different from saying something is safe. Don't you have a bit of radiation phobia? I mean, if it's safe, then why take all those radiation protection measures? You wouldn't have to put on masks. But it's gray. We don't know. You have to think how to protect yourself. We have to think about how to protect ourselves. If you made a wrong decision, you might go to hell. Something horrible may happen to you. Then you should say openly that it's gray. But it's better to worry collectively knowing it's gray than saying this, just believing in the safety myth. Yes, I agree with you. We should start the next action from here. If we are wheeled around in silence, we'll be at the end of it. But what to do with the risk in the case it's gray? It's a matter of personal choice. Are you sure? It may be a matter of personal choice if it's a risk like smoking, but because you can decide whether you smoke or not. But when it comes to radiation exposure caused by a nuclear accident, you can't choose whether you're exposed to it or not. It's not correct to view the risk as an issue of personal choice. But how can we react? I don't have any scientific knowledge, so it's not possible for me to decide what to do. We don't have to necessarily choose for ourselves. Then what should we do? We have only to look on the gray risk as black, which means it's dangerous. That's much easier. So we regard 100 millisieverts or even below it as dangerous and start to take action. If later you find, in fact, that there was no problem, so much the better. But in any case, better safe than sorry. That's much better to have taken countermeasures. So we take action with the highest priority on safety. But can we really afford such a leisurely approach in this fiercely competitive world economy? We will learn the economic cost has all been wasted for nothing when we learn, in fact, that there was no big problem. But when I think about the hugeness, the huge level of damage of a nuclear accident like the one on March 11th, I think the economic cost for the action is a minor problem. I wonder why such a simple thing like this is still not realized. This is what is called Precautionary Principle. It's an internationally well-acknowledged basic principle, but the Japanese government has been reluctant to introduce this into Japan, refuses to introduce this into Japan, and also most of the Japanese people still don't know what it is. The very basic principle of the civil suit is that it is up to the one who filed the suit to prove the existence of the risk. It is contrary to this basic principle to consider a gray risk as dangerous without even being able to prove it. Yes, you will never be able to prove the risk. Stop making stupid arguments. It's impossible. You won't be able to do it. Next, please explain the next argument of the plaintiffs. Now, I'd like to make an argument concerning internal exposure. We have data on the health damage caused by the Chernobyl accident in areas with the same level of radioactive contamination as in Koriyama. Those data show the future. This is Chernobyl data, but those data show the future of Koriyama, the future of the plaintiffs living in Koriyama City. First, we have an expert who clarified effects of radiation on the children's thyroid disease, Mr. Katsuma Yagasaki, Professor Emeritus at the University of Ryukyu. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Katsunori Yagasaki. I submitted a statement of my views on the risk in Koriyama in comparison with what is happening in the Luginui area in Ukraine, which is in a very similar radiological situation to that of Koriyama. So I would like to show you briefly what I said in the statement and to make some remarks on what should be done in the future. First of all, these are the Ukrainian scientists who collected medical data that I used. They are members of the Ukrainian Scientific Academy, which is a very honorable and trustworthy organization. The data I used are of great quality and very reliable. Very good quality and very reliable. First, I would like to talk about the three countries near Chernobyl: Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. One of the measurements taken to protect people's health in zoning according to the extent of the radioactive contamination. So in this system, there are three categories of areas: areas of compulsory evacuation where you are prohibited to stay, an area of evacuation right where if you request to evacuate you are compensated, and area of enhanced control where you can stay if you want, but you have to take enhanced radio protection measures. What is characteristic is that evacuation rights start from 1 millisieverts a year and the compulsory evacuation from 5 millisieverts a year. If we apply these criteria to Koriyama, a very wide area would be designated as evacuation area. The schools of the plaintiffs are all within the area with 5 millisieverts a year or more, which is equivalent to the compulsory evacuation area in Ukraine. Japan has to learn from the experiences of these countries. This figure shows the evolution of the cases of thyroid cancer and of other thyroid diseases. And other cancers. Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded in 1986. What is characteristic is that there was a sudden increase in cases 5 years after the accident, and after 9 years, 100 children among 1,000, that is 10% of children, had some kind of illness. Thyroid cancer cases in 1995 reached more than 12 cases among 1,000 children, which represents a very high ratio. In Belarus, before Chernobyl, there was only 0.1 cases in a year among 100,000 children. So this is an enormous increase in thyroid cancer cases. On the other hand, regarding thyroid diseases in 4 municipalities closest to the Fukushima nuclear power plant, in those areas, we have data from those 18 or less. This is for 3,765 children, which were published about a month ago. Of them, 2,622 children, representing nearly 70%, had no trouble in their thyroid, but among 1,117 children, about 30% of this whole pool of 3,765, small cysts were observed. 26 children, or 0.7%, had larger cysts. Now, this figure shows the results of measuring of cesium concentration in each organ. The measuring was done on persons who died in 1997. Red bars represent children and blue bars adults. What is characteristic is that a very high concentration is found in the thyroid of children. This shows that the irradiation of children's thyroid does not end with the rapid decrease of radioactive iodine-131. But that it continues further by the concentrated radioactive cesium. That is why I believe that the government should take more enhanced radio protection measures on behalf of the Fukushima residents, especially for the children. Second, we'd like to listen to Dr. Eisuke Matsui, director of the Gifu Institute for Environmental Medicine. He made it clear that there will occur a variety of health problems besides thyroid diseases. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eisuke Matsui. I am a clinical doctor who have seen sufferers of lung disease for a long time. Before talking about Chernobyl cases, I would like to talk about one case of a couple living in Koriyama. The wife was in the 6th week of pregnancy when the Fukushima nuclear accident occurred. They consulted a gynecologist, and later they learned that the fetus had an illness. It had trouble in its heart. This is a normal heart of a 5-week-old fetus. There are cardiac ventricles and atria. In between, there are walls that separate right and left chambers. It is around the 8th week that the walls start to form. In the left chamber, there is blood full of oxygen. That's the left chamber. While the blood in the right chambers contain much carbon dioxide in the blood. The blood receives oxygen in the lungs and comes back into the left chamber to be pumped to the whole body. In the case of usually this wall is closed by the 8th week. But in the case of the couple's baby, the formation of the wall separating the atria was found to be insufficient. The parents were very worried and decided to move to a less contaminated area to give birth to the baby. After the birth, the malformation was confirmed by a cardiologist. It was born slightly premature. Afterwards, it was found to have malformation. In other words, the wall still, there remained opening. The wall was not properly formed. So because of that, the blood that has CO2 is mixed with the blood that received oxygen. And so, of course, all sorts of problems. This will lead to a big problem or problems all along in its life, and what to do, whether to undertake an operation or not, is still to be determined. They're looking at it right now and see if an operation might be necessary. Right now, they haven't done an operation yet, but anyway, that's the situation. So the problem in this case is that this kind of congenital trouble can be caused by various external effects, including radiation. In other words, the radiation can cause congenital effects, problems. So we have to take precautionary approach concerning these kind of problems. Now I'll talk about the effects of the Chernobyl accident. These are the results obtained in Belarus. The place in which these investigations were conducted has almost the same level of radiation as Koriyama. The figures in the left column are of pre-Chernobyl, and those in the right column of post-Chernobyl. These include various kinds of congenital problems. The same tendency can be observed in areas with less contamination. This table may be an advanced warning for future Koriyama that in the future children with congenital problems may be born as a result of the radiation. It's a kind of warning, this chart. Another concern is cancer in general. These are all figures for all cancers in areas with higher levels of radiation in the provinces of Gomel and Mogilev. We can observe significant increases. This is compared to before and after the accident. There are more people with cancer after the accident than before. Now, this graphic chart is only for thyroid cancer. There was a much sharper increase than expected, and also at a much earlier stage. The dotted line represents the expectation. We can see increases only a few years after the accident. For people that were very early on, it's even 2-3 years. The solid line includes both children and adult thyroid cancer. The ratio is much higher among children. The data are from New York Science Academy. This table is one on non-cancerous diseases, cataract cases among children. Cataract is normally very rare among children, but it is known that irradiation causes cataracts. At the level equivalent to that of Koriyama, we can observe increase. It's just about the same level as Koriyama you see here. So you can see that the cataracts increase compared to lower levels of contamination. More children have cataracts. This diagram is also on child cataract cases. The higher the radiation level, the higher the morbidity gets. This diagram is on the ratio of the causes of death. The diagram. Now, the next one, this one, is a person who died in Belarus. Anjanesky compared those children, those people who died before and after the accident. There were many people who had cardiac problems. I was very surprised at this. Now, looking at what type of radiation was concentrated in which organs, cesium-137 is concentrated in the thyroid, and high rates are of children. The blue is adult. And this is very shocking because we knew that radioactive iodine with a short half-life concentrates in thyroid, but cesium has a longer half-life of about 30 years. And so this was a very shocking piece of information. Now, number 6 is a heart in which there is relatively high concentration. This shows the ratio of children without abnormal electrocardiogram according to the internal accumulation of radioactive cesium. But so the more cesium is concentrated, the higher ratio the children with abnormal electrocardiogram gets. There's a dose response here that you can see. An official report issued by the government of Ukraine says the following: the ratio of healthy children among the irradiated is decreasing from 7.5% during around 1986 to 7.2% in 2003. On the other hand, the ratio of the children suffering from chronic diseases is increasing from 8.4% in 1986-97 to 77.8% in 2003. How do you rebut, defendant? We plead ignorance. Do you mean you plead ignorance for all of the arguments on the diseases that could appear on the plaintiffs in comparison with those caused by the Chernobyl accident? Yes, I do, Your Honor. Defendant, please explain your arguments concerning internal exposure. I have none, Your Honor. Now, we'd like to invite our jury to discuss the risk of internal exposure that has just been argued. Koriyama said they pleaded ignorance about anything about what the effects of Chernobyl or what these effects could be a cause to cause problems for Koriyama citizens. That's unforgivable. But they pleaded that because they don't really know. It would be much more problematic if you had pretended that you know what was when you didn't know. So it's wrong. But the city authority has a responsibility to give children education in a safe environment, so they should conduct a thorough investigation. Still, you can't do what's impossible. However, the plaintiffs, who are all laymen, have collected and submitted this much literature. Here, 101 references, while Koriyama City has prepared no scientific expertise whatsoever. That's wrong. They could have collected as much literature as they wanted from the Ministry of Education. That's always taken care of the municipality. By the way, it's not only the city of Koriyama, but also many of the scientists in our country that are keeping silent about internal exposure. The scientists say they can't speak up because there are many things that are unclear about internal exposure. Isn't that right, then? But a medical doctor, they should do what they can in any event. Even if they don't have a full understanding of the mechanism of the disease, trying various methods to prevent and to cure a disease, isn't it internal exposure the same thing? I think there are moments when scientists have to act even if they don't really understand the subject. One of such typical moments was when in Japan in 2001, there were cows that were found that were suspected of BSE, mad cow disease. The cause of the mad cow disease was not known then, but scientists did everything they could to limit the damage. Isn't this the right attitude as scientists? Then what are the moments when scientists should act? When are those moments? The moment in our case is when there may be potential health hazards caused by internal exposure. even if the relationship between the two is not completely elucidated. So when the risk is gray, scientists should then not let people be exposed to the risk, right? But that would mean you oblige scientists to call gray black. Their conscience as scientists wouldn't allow such a thing. First of all, what decision you make on a gray risk is just a matter of individual choice. In closing, please explain the plaintiff's legal claim. In the past, the Supreme Court said in its judgment that the life of a human being weighs more than the whole planet. This rule applies unconditionally to children who are our future. Besides this, the children of the present case are the victims of man-made calamity for which they have no responsibility whatsoever. In light of justice and fairness, which are the ultimate ideals of the law, there are no grounds to justify that the lives of these victimized children should be endangered continuously because they are not allowed to evacuate. Regarding the effects of radiation exposure, there still remains many aspects unknown even in the cutting-edge advanced science, and on the other hand, once the effects on health appear, it will be irreversible. To cope with this, with such unpredictable and irreversible hazards, we have to apply the precautionary principle, which consists in protect if in doubt. This principle applies unconditionally, especially to children who are our future. The plaintiffs have submitted in this trial exhibits from number 1 to number 101. Those exhibits show the plaintiff's cumulative external dose from the air dose rate range from 12.7 to 24 millisieverts a year since March 11th. It is clear that in light of the evacuation criteria and in comparison with the health hazards of the Chernobyl accident, the defendant has the obligation to evacuate the plaintiffs. Please explain the defendant's legal claim. If the plaintiffs consider the radiation hazardous, they have only to change their schools by themselves. The city of Koriyama is not prohibiting that. As long as the plaintiffs have the freedom to change their school, the city is not violating the plaintiffs' rights. Do you have any counter-arguments? Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiffs may have the freedom to change their schools, but at the same time, they have the right to be educated. When the plaintiffs request the city of Koriyama to educate them, it is the city's constitutional duty to respond to the request and provide public education, and the duty includes that the city provide education in a safe environment. This is what is sought in this court. The city cannot be exempted of this constitutional duty just because the plaintiffs have the right to change school. Not only that, actually it is extremely difficult to exercise the right to change school. It's only a pie in the sky for most of the citizens working, as the plaintiffs' mothers say in the following testimonies. Testimony of the plaintiff's mothers on why they do not change school and the freedom of changing school. When school started, when the level was increased, we realized the radiation levels won't go down right away. So a lot of people said, or when I was told, well, is it okay just because you're okay? You know, everybody is having to deal with this situation. I felt it was important to protect all the citizens, all the children of Fukushima. I think that people don't realize that it's really hard to elect to evacuate. It's really difficult that each person individually, singly, elect to evacuate and go alone somewhere different. It's really difficult. And also, especially when you elect to evacuate and you say that you've come from Fukushima, there's prejudice. It's really difficult to elect to evacuate. I think it's important to go in the direction of protecting the children, but they don't do that. They're not going in that direction of protecting the children of Koriyama. Also, if you're working in Fukushima, it's really hard to suddenly have to leave. I think people who are wealthy can evacuate easier. Or, for example, if you're rich, you can send your children to a school that's a whole dormitory system, another place. But that's not easy if you don't have the money. They just say they're not preventing us from leaving, but that's not enough. Please explain your next argument. Even if the city of Koriyama is not the perpetrator, but a victim of the Fukushima nuclear accident. The perpetrator is Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO. It is TEPCO that violated the plaintiff's right, not the city of Koriyama. Therefore, it's wrong that the plaintiffs ask for relief to the city. Any counter-arguments? Even if the city is a victim of the nuclear accident, it has the constitutional duty to respond to the request of the plaintiffs exercising their right to be educated. This duty imposed on the city cannot be exempted simply because it's a victim of the Fukushima nuclear accident. So Koriyama City has to face up to that. It cannot be relieved of its responsibility. Now, lastly, regarding the preceding legal arguments, we'll have the jury discuss and deliberate these. Well, today, all over Fukushima, we're trying to overcome damage caused by rumors, making efforts to rehabilitate the prefecture, and reaching out to those who've evacuated to come back to Fukushima. It's a really important time, but demanding evacuation of children at this crucial time. I mean, is it really a good idea? It would dampen the efforts to rehabilitate. Look at all the people who are working to rehabilitate the prefecture. Of course, rehabilitation is important, but if we are to rehabilitate in the current condition, what would become of the point the plaintiffs have raised? According to the official report of the Ukrainian government, children who were healthy after radiation went down from 27% in 1986 to 7% in 2003. And those who have chronic diseases have jumped from 8% to 77%. Here, we have a recommendation by the people working both on rehabilitation and the radiation exposure problem. free medical treatment up to 18-year-old children, and promotion of cutting-edge advanced cancer treatments. You see, with these measures, aren't we taking care of the situation? But I would prefer my child will not get cancer in the first place, rather than benefiting from those free medical treatments or advanced cancer treatments after my children get cancer. If you find it so difficult to put your trust in the authorities, then why not change schools? Nobody is stopping you. Also, it seems to me almost impossible to evacuate all the 30,000 children in Koriyama. That's not the case. In Chernobyl, thanks to female leaders' determination, 520,000 children and mothers evacuated from the city of Kiev. There's no reason that we can't do this in Koriyama. If we had the will, we could do it. Speaking of rehabilitation, Mother was saying that the city of Koriyama used local rice for school lunches in order to contribute to local rehabilitation of our area. Then, when concerned parents made a petition to the city council to hold a briefing meeting so that we could ask questions, the council rejected this request. The local rice is checked and its safety is verified before its use. So, what's the problem? There's no problem. Yeah, to say it's dangerous just because it's local is harmful rumor. No, I'm not saying the local rice is hazardous, but it is true that parents are worried. What are they worried about? People used to talk a lot about mental stress from the fear of radiation. It is the worst hazard after Chernobyl accident. Maybe this time it's the same here. I don't think so. I think the worries of the parents are truly grounded in reality. What are you saying? What's the grounds? Because even when food shows less radiation than the government's provisional standard, there's no guarantee that it's safe. Is it so hard for you to trust your own country? Last year, I had an opportunity to listen to a Ukrainian medical doctor who's seen children in Chernobyl for 25 years. When she learned that the Japanese provisional standards for cesium in water is 200 becquerels a liter, the doctor was stupefied and said, "Don't be ridiculous, because in Ukraine it is 2 becquerels a liter." She said, in other words, it's 100 times stricter than the Japanese standard. Then how did Japan decide on the 200 becquerels per liter? They started from the total annual acceptable internal dose of 5 millisieverts a year. Then they distributed the dose to each of the food, rice, vegetables, drinks, etc., according to our average intake of food. But 5 millisieverts just for internal exposure is outrageous. But imposing tougher standards would devastate Fukushima's farming industry. It's impossible, can't be done. But still, from this April, tougher standards will be introduced based on the maximum internal dose of 1 millisieverts a year. So this will be 5 times stricter than last year. So no worries. We're not talking about 1 millisieverts for external exposure. We're talking about 1 millisieverts for internal exposure only. Is that really safe? If it's so hard for you to trust your country and you're so worried about school meals, why don't you have your children bring their own private lunch to school? You can choose to do that. Choice is yours. School's not going to object that. They're not saying they object. But then what is the role of the national and local governments? Isn't it their biggest responsibility to create an environment where students can study with safety and without fear? As for this matter, as I said earlier, at the end of the day, we must obey the national and local governments. That's the way to go. We must obey. That sounds like the mentality of, oh, don't let them know, just leave it to us. Nothing has changed from how it was in the past if we go according to that. In Nagaoka, where I was born, there's an old story. The city of Nagaoka was devastated in the Boshin War. That's a civil war in the 19th century. Someone compassionate offered 100 bags of rice to the people in Nagaoka. Everybody was delighted. But the leader of Nagaoka decided to sell the rice to construct a school. People were totally surprised because they had no rice to eat even today. But the leader said the following: it won't be long before we'll eat up all the 100 bags of rice. However, if you use that and sell it and use it for education, it will bring us 10,000 or 1 million bags of rice tomorrow. He said, he did what he said. That is how we are here today. So real rehabilitation is possible only if you put children in the center of your concern, in the center of our concern. I think that's the message of the old-time leaders, old-time people are telling us right now. This is the end of our play, our court play. In a real trial, of course, the jury would then take a vote. But in this citizen court, you all are the jury. You are the jury. It is you that will vote. So right now, the jury here will not vote. Okay, now the actors will change. The same people are the actors, but they will be different actors. One year has passed since that day. Our life is now becoming more settled. Even though our life has become more settled, still the radiation does not go away. Within our home, we evacuate to places that have lower levels of radiation within the house. We don't drink from the faucet. We eat vegetables that come from safe areas. We eat rice that was grown before the nuclear power plant accident. We avoid places with high levels of radiation. We wear masks when we go to school, and when we come back from school, we're living it like this and doing all sorts of things like this. Since the day of the nuclear power plant accident, all the levels of radiation have come down gradually. I can't believe that 1 year has passed since the East Japan Great Earthquake. That is because there is a lot of radiation right here, right now, something that we can't see but is very dangerous. There are many people who have evacuated from Fukushima because it has been affected by radiation. In this situation, we're doing our very, very best. Mother said, we can't play in the snow, but I don't want to play in the house anymore. The flowers that I care about so much, I cared about them so much. They were so important to me, but because before they bloom, there is no more, so I've decided to give up growing flowers. It's been a year since March 11th. What I'm thinking now is about the future of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and about radiation. Because of the hydrogen explosion, the radiation came to my city, Koriyama, so I'm very worried. The nuclear power plant is still releasing radiation and has forced people living around the plant to evacuate. In response, Tokyo Electric uses the word over and over again, unpredicted. And at first, they didn't deal with the situation diligently. When I heard that, I thought they're running away from reality. On this first anniversary I think once again that we really have to think more about different ways of making electricity. In Japan today, besides nuclear, we mainly use fossil fuels and hydropower to make electricity. But for making electricity from now on, we must address the problem that we are using limited resources, also the problem of limited space. Therefore, although it will cost money and take time, I think we should increase our use of wind and solar, etc. They're unlimited sources and have less toxic materials. It's 1 year since the earthquake. It's as though it's normal that there is radiation everywhere around us. It's as though it's normal that sports practice takes 3 hours, or that we hold sports events indoors and wait indoors. It's like this, that everything is normal. But I want to return to our life the way it was. I want to play sports outdoors with all my heart, with all my might. Now I'm thinking and feeling many things. First is anxiety. Fukushima is affected by the nuclear power plant accident. We don't know what will happen to us from now on. And the very best way to keep our level of exposure to the very minimum has not yet been found. Therefore, I have lots of things I'm anxious about. Second is about the ocean in Fukushima. Because of the tsunami and radiation, Fukushima's beautiful sea has been lost. When I think that the beautiful sea is gone, I'm so full of sadness. In this way, I'm feeling and thinking about a lot of things at this time. The first anniversary. Who made nuclear power and for what reason? Why do other people have to be mixed up in this and be affected by radiation? Be irradiated. How about you yourself getting irradiated also? Then you'll probably understand the feeling of Fukushima people. Fukushima people have been irradiated even though they did nothing wrong. They did nothing. Fukushima people are worried how radiation will affect them in the future, what will happen to them in the future. They're living, trying to overcome this anxiety. Children right now are doing their very best thinking about the future, but the adults only are thinking about themselves. They do nothing. Or there may be people who are thinking about this and other people who are not. Those of us living in Fukushima must continue to fight on and on with this radiation we cannot see. We must fight against it. There are so many people piled up, so many problems piled up, but we must believe that we are making progress, recovering from this disaster, and must stand up no matter what challenges and difficulties we face. I will walk forward in this way. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much for all of you here. And now we will listen to some wonderful music.
Sola してしまう
This theme, what we discussed today, is something that is of utmost importance to us. The very difficult problem that Fukushima citizens face is huge. Right now, you're all suffering and worried about the safety, the health of the children. We're all worried about the children. For all of those of you hearing and listening to this right now today, please think of this as though it were your own children. Please bring your hearts to us as though this is all about your own children. And please continue to watch this. Please continue to connect with us. Email us, contact us. Thank you very much, everybody. I will now sing the next song. It's to the children. Please listen. I do it with all my heart.